Hey guys, what's up out there? It's David Duford here at davidduford.com, where I help insurance agents like you become top producing insurance professionals. And today continues our month-to-month interview series where I interview top producing agents, agencies, and thought leaders in the insurance business. And today I have none other but Mr. Brandon Clay with me. Say hello out there, Brandon.
Oh, happy Friday, everyone.
Yeah, I guess Friday after all. Thank goodness. So let me tell you a little bit about Brandon if you don't know him. So Brandon, first of all, is the author of a book that I highly recommend that you should all pick up. It's called 6 Hours to Six Figures. You can find it on Amazon. I think, Brandon, you probably sell it on your website too. And a little bit about Brandon. Brandon has been in the Medicare industry for 23 years and as an executive with United Healthcare, Cigna, and XL Health. He is currently the VP of Health Sales for One Life America, a division of Heartland Financial Group. In this role, he orchestrates a professional approach to selling, combining final expense, Medicare products, and hospital indemnity. His vision is to see agents go from selling one product to becoming a senior market advisor, as we'll talk about today in depth. And as an author, he has written 7 books, including the best-selling Sales Crumbs from the Master's Table and 6 Hours to Six Figures, becoming a six-figure senior insurance advisor. So warm welcomes, Brandon. Thanks again for joining us.
No, thank you, David.
So let's jump right in with the questions we have lined up here. So first of all, where did you get the idea of this concept of 6 hours to six figures come from?
Well, obviously titles tend to draw attention. And actually, if you can see some of my books here on the screen, my dad, when I was young, gave me Think and Grow Rich. And if you know a little more about Napoleon Hill's story, and you read the book, while it certainly talks about success and being able to generate great income, it goes a little bit broader. So a little bit of that titling was to kind of draw attention. But there's a reality there, David, that for agents that learn how to become a senior market advisor, 6 hours or six figures in terms of linear income, but certainly 6 figures in terms of renewal income is absolutely probable and maybe even inevitable if they stick with it.
Great. So yeah, let's kind of build on this because this is interesting. If you know me a little bit, I come from a predominantly final expense background. I'm a guy that focuses on one product and one product only. That's generally what I teach. But one of the things I've been exploring a lot in my own content is the fact that, there is a level of, viability in getting to the point where along your career, you should pick up other products and become more than just a one-trick pony. So why don't you kind of describe that to us, this concept of what a senior market advisor is and how it can be beneficial?
Well, and David, and I know you have a final expense expertise, and I certainly am dangerous with final expense. The irony is I had 23 years on the Medicare side, largely on the carrier front, as you outlined in that opening. And then I had an opportunity once I'd left a company, the last opportunity I was with as a person as an executive, was how do you really help these agents do more, be more, and have more? And the most logical chassis was actually final expense. And, in some respects, final expense is the easiest to learn, and don't be offended there, but it's the hardest to sell. The warriors that sell final expense are just a little bit different animal than, to a degree, the Medicare Advantage agent at large. So using that as the forefront, number one, if you've mastered the hardest to sell, Medicare on the opposite spectrum is difficult to learn, more challenging, and dare I say hard to learn, but it is easy to sell. And you could characterize that around living benefits, something they use all the time, or you could characterize, final expenses, oh my gosh, it's a premium, it's a face value, I die, they pay. It's not always the most comfortable conversation to have. But for an agent that already has proficiency or a level of mastery with final expense, I don't dare say no-brainer because it's not that simple for all of us. But certainly, as you mentioned, it's viable that they can literally add in a few things and be able to serve their clients at a higher level, certainly giving more sustainability to their career. And then if we could be a little bit selfish, earning a high income to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things there that I think are important, especially for you new agents that are looking into this business of selling insurance. One of the things that insurance does that a lot of different businesses talk about or profess is that this actually does provide the opportunity to make a passive income, not just to go out there and actively produce. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you get with the right kind of products, in this case specifically Medicare, you can build a renewal income that's literally six figures and larger for some people, and not have to get out of bed in the first thing in the morning to actually continue to earn it. Of course, you got to service your clients and do all that stuff, but you can live more of the lifestyle that you want to with a lot of access to these carriers. So the one thing I want to talk about next is, you mentioned creating a six-figure advisor. Tell us more about how agents can generate that level of income with this concept of yours.
Right. So you touched on it even in that last segment that you spoke about, David. So I've got my shirt here and it says SMA 100K. Stands for Senior Market Advisor 100K. And then right underneath it, it says serve and deserve. So if we can serve our clients at a higher level, we absolutely deserve to generate that kind of income. And any discussion on commission is a powder keg. But the good news about Medicare, especially on the Medicare Advantage front, it's standardized. So if someone is turning 65, unless you're in a career captive environment, and we have those distribution partners as well, but you're going to get $480 if someone is turning 65 and new to Medicare or new to Medicare Advantage. And we can talk about Medicare supplements as well. They're in the conversation. But what's amazing and explosive about it, David, is that in the second year forward, the carrier that has that member that you brought to them is going to pay you $240 every year for each member. So if you can get 100 members a year, 50 members a year, and at some point build your clientele into the 300-400 range, that's when you get into the six-figure renewal environment. And yes, I know agents who predominantly focus on final expense have layered Medicare on, and they're approaching those types of numbers. So not only is it viable, achievable, but it's not really a pipe dream or blue skying. It really gives people a chance to generate that kind of wealth.
Yeah, and I remember when you were on stage at the 8% Nation seminar that Cody Askins did. I think it was you that asked everybody to raise their hand and ask about making a certain amount of income. And then we had people who made that on an active basis and then on a passive basis. And there were a lot of people that were doing it. I was actually surprised at the number that were. But it goes to show you that these people came from all different walks of life, different parts of the country. And this is a market that absolutely exists out there that any agent can really tap into and really, leverage what you're talking about. So let's kind of build on, we're talking about being a senior advisor, but what does that actually mean from a granular level? If we're looking at carriers, what kind of, not carriers, but so much as products, what kind of products are out there that would, consist of a portfolio for a senior advisor?
Right. So at the core, David, it's three products. It's the final expense. Again, I call that the chassis. It's the fuel. It's the thing that allows you to get in front of more people. And we can talk about compliance and some of the things that might constrict on the Medicare Advantage side. But then there's Medicare products, Medicare Advantage, and Medicare Supplement. You'll hear me predominantly focusing on Medicare Advantage largely because the final expense lead, the final expense demographic economically is a little more geared toward Medicare Advantage, but you're going to run into some Medicare Supplement opportunities as well. And then there's a third product, which even some of the most seasoned Medicare Advantage agents aren't taking full advantage of, no pun intended, and not leveraging, and it's hospital indemnity cancer plans. And again, as we get into some of this, that triumvirate, those three products are what give you all the avenues you need to get linear income to $100,000 and six-figure renewal income, simply those three products.
So, we've talked just briefly about Medicare. And again, if we look through the eyes of somebody who may be watching this and is newer to just insurance, or maybe they just got in a final expense, they like the idea of this renewal type of income. I think it's important to spend some time delineating the difference between what you see as your primary product being Medicare Advantage, as well as what Medicare supplements do. So can you kind of describe the difference between both so people can have just a basic understanding of how they work?
No, absolutely. And in framing this, I'll kind of give you an outline of what it takes to be ready to sell, as the term that they use for each one. So I'll start with Medicare Advantage because I have predominantly mentioned that particular type of product or plan. And Medicare Advantage is actually a Part C coverage under the umbrella of Medicare. So these companies, and we'll put a few out there, Humana, United, Aetna, Cigna, and there's regional plans, Anthem plans, WellCare, that are all out there in the marketplace under Part C with contracts directly with the federal government. So when someone turns 65 or they're 75, but they want to join one of these plans as an agent, once you're certified and ready to sell, you facilitate the enrollment and they join a Part C Medicare Advantage plan. And so Medicare Advantage normally is inclusive of the medical coverage and the pharmacy coverage, MAPD. And that is actually known on some infomercials that many of you have likely watched. It is known as an all-in-one replacement plan. It replaces, and again, they're still on Medicare, but they're on Part C. They no longer use their red, white, and blue card or a standalone Part D. It is now that one unified all-in-one replacement. Medicare Supplement, on the other hand, is considered supplemental or in addition to. So a Medicare Supplement, after the red, white, and blue A and B pays its part, the supplement pays in addition to and covers co-pays, costs, and co-insurances, etc. And people pay a premium for that, just like a life insurance policy. And those might be, just to keep saying it, Mutual of Omaha, Americo, companies these agents that sell final expense would know. And the premiums are higher, but it's more comprehensive coverage. And so one real other quick distinction, David, Medicare Advantage requires certification, AHIP, and some other things. Medicare Supplement simply means contracting. And as you contract and understand what you're doing, you're off and running fairly quickly. But hopefully that distinction is something your audience can grasp.
Yeah, thank you for that basic overview. I think it's helpful. And I think it's interesting too, you like we said from the outset, you have over 2 decades in the Medicare field itself, but the strategy that you teach, actually, you're leading with final expense, correct, Brandon?
Correct. A little counterintuitive that a Medicare Advantage guy that designed plans, did it for 20 plus years, actually 19 years, and now 4 years with distribution. But the logic was, and we can get into it as we go further along, lead generation on Medicare Advantage is a little difficult for a single agent. You can get connected to partners that might provide you leads, but it's a seasonal activity. It's October 15th, December 7th. And that's when the heyday of Medicare comes in and everybody's spending money, leads are being given away. That's all good stuff. But what about an agent that wants to continue to sell throughout the year to people that are dual special needs, that are something called low income subsidy, that are aging in? So from a lead generation acquisition aspect, final expense leads, we'll use the word, are plentiful. They're lower cost, but you've got to be focused on selling final expense and then ultimately compliantly pivot into Medicare products. So that was the more sustainable model for me, David. So again, counterintuitive that a Medicare man would lead with final expense, but that's been explosive in the environments, particularly the organizations I work with. We have grown exponentially, leveraging the chassis of final expense. And I dare say that any individual agents that watch you and follow you and have gotten really good at final expense, this would be almost a life-changing add-on for them.
So one thing that, personally, I'm unclear with, because for the record, I'm just final expense. But one of the things I've heard, and maybe you could help dispel this concern, is that there are compliance issues, regulatory issues, if you will, if you sell a Medicare Advantage plan. And so I was wondering if you could kind of clear up maybe what myself and others think. It's like, well, if I'm out there selling final expense and I stumble across an LIS or a DSNP and they can switch, how do you keep that compliant so that you're not putting yourself in some sort of regulatory risk?
Right. Well, first and foremost, there with the Medicare Advantage, there are a set of rules and guidelines, and you'll learn most of that in the AHIP training, American Health Insurance Plans training, that's required for agents that want to get into this space. But I'll tell you, David, having actually been involved in Medicare as an agent in 1996, when United Healthcare was doing its first health plans, then as I was running and administering plans in 2006, when brokers at large were allowed to join the party and start marketing these plans. Prior to that, you had to be a W-2 employee, essentially, to sell them. And there was a wave of wild, wild west and things that just kind of went and got out of hand. I mean, we can honestly say that, and those of us that were there and saw it, we understood there was a need for change and a need to kind of curtail some of the activities that were happening. But here's where I would drive home a couple of things, and we can get into some specifics. A lot of what the agents that sell final expense now are hearing is largely urban legend, in some cases probably overstated. Now, do you need to know what the rules are and engage properly? Absolutely. But I'll say the simplest things. If you have a book of business, David, and you've got, let's say, 100 final expense clients on the books, you can literally call and say, this is David Duford. I sold you X company 6 months ago. I'm now certified with Medicare. I'd love to come do a Medicare review with you in October. Totally permissible. It's just like saying Beetlejuice 3 times. You can say Medicare Advantage to your clients if you have an existing business relationship that's transactional. So if most of your listeners and viewers and followers would do is just get certified and only work with the clients they sell final expense to, they would end up generating a fairly large book of opportunity. So that would be the first thing, is just to simply say you can connect with your clients and do that compliantly. There's a few things you have to do after that, but certainly outreach to people you know and have done business with is certainly permissible.
Yeah, and if you kind of think this through, if there's agents right now that have written, 2 or 3 years worth of final expense, and maybe they wrote 150, 200 cases, and they've got a 400 or 500 on the books right now. With that strategy, you just pick the phone up and call these people, and they've already bought from you once. They know, like, and trust you. And when the time comes to look at Medicare Advantage plans, you've got a great opportunity. And it's just sitting out there waiting to be had, is what it sounds like,
No, exactly, David. And again, obviously, we would literally have an entire podcast on compliance, the do's, the don'ts, and the shouldn'ts. And I actually teach agents to go in a more, I'll say, restrictive approach. Because look, and I'm going to say it in its extremity, and the carriers have no longer cringed at this because they've watched our model work. But we're door-knocking, porch-hopping warriors that sell final expense. They've got that BRC that's precious to them. They paid for it. It was given to them. They've got to get some level of conversion. The people aren't answering the phone. So guess what? They're door-knocking and porch-hopping. But I can already see the expression on the Medicare Advantage agents who are out there saying, oh my gosh, he said porch-hopping and door-knocking. You can't do that with Medicare Advantage. And you can't. But if I door-knock and porch-hop on a BRC from a life lead, and I'm using your techniques, David, to sell more final expense, after that sale is closed and consummated, I can actually begin compliantly to engage the Medicare conversation. I could even get a permission to contact if it's a future opportunity or a scope of appointment. And I recommend, and again, you'll get 1,000 versions of this, go back 48 hours. Number one, you cannot cross-sell. That's one of the biggest prohibitive actions. But you could certainly go back 48 hours later and do what you need to do to help them with their Medicare health decision.
Great. Thanks for that explanation, Brandon. So next question here. If an agent is selling final expense now, how can they get involved with these other products and start becoming a senior market advisor?
So irony. A few years ago, I joined the organization I'm with now, and I literally was in a room much like what you saw in the 8% Nation, and I said, how many of you that sell final expense actually have a health license? 40% of the room did not have a health license. And so I said, if you guys would commit to doing that, I'm going to kind of help you matriculate along the concept. So first thing, you do need a health license, and I don't take for granted now that agents out there selling final expense as a predominant product don't already have it. But after your health license, there's that AHIP I keep referring to, American Health Insurance Plans. It's a 5-module course, might take you a weekend. But for the first year people, they're going to learn a lot. It's going to help close the gap of competency around what they need to know and learn. And then you eventually get certified with a specific carrier. And David, I know I'm kind of going in deep, but as I tell agents, this is not Baskin Robbins. You don't need 31 carriers for MA out of the gate. Probably pick 1, pick 2, and become certified, ready to sell, and then put yourself in a position to have some experiences with your clientele who already know you, trust you, and will live through some of your unconsciously incompetence or even consciously incompetence until you can help them get a better solution for their situation. And it happens every single day.
Absolutely. So let's kind of build on that, because I can see people who watch this that may have considered going this route or are now just considering going this route. They may think, oh man, to sit down and take an exam and to get certified and do all this, it's like Oh, it's a huge learning curve, so kind of give us a timeline of when an agent should consider getting involved in this kind of approach. Let's say somebody's selling final expense that wants to start getting into Medicare Advantage and indemnity plans. What part of their career would be a good idea to consider that? And then just a timeline on, when, if you decide to do this, how long should it take until you're at the point where you're, like you said, competent enough to get out there and help people?
No, David, great question. So first, and again, counterintuitive to my background and my history, if an agent is just getting licensed and they're trying to do all of this, that's a mistake. They need to be proficient, and the word proficient can have a production meter on it. It can have a comfortability meter on it. But, even within the organization that I work with now, we actually make agents wait until they've reached a certain amount of AP. So it's probably, let's just say 3 months if it's a brand new agent. But if you're proficient and making a living with your final expense, I would say now, which is February, March, this is the time to get in. The mistake I say agents make is trying to jump in the water in the deep pool of AEP, October 15th, December 7th. Get acclimated now, get certified now, have your 2 or 3 experiences. And you mentioned about the continuum where you can become, consciously competent or even consciously incompetent. Sometimes it's not a bad thing to know that you don't know. That being said, I have a standard thing I say: the first 5 sales enrollments you make, you're an order taker. You're certified with 1 or 2 companies. The docs in the network, the pharmacies match, and the benefits are good. Sign them up, clap, clap, you've got your first one, but you're an order taker. Nothing wrong with that. After the next 5 or 10, you're stepping into the area where you're like, oh, well, maybe I should be looking at this carrier versus this, just like you would in final expense through the underwriting continuum. But then you're going to be a professional. But then eventually, at around 15 to 20 sales, it's a magical thing. You become an advisor. And at the highest level, David, and this is where I'll end this portion of it, at the highest level, then you're going to start to be able to say a dual eligible, QMB, SLMB. You're going to be able to say low income subsidy and get them qualified for it because you know the income thresholds. That's when you're working magic. That's when you become an advocate. But you need those first 5 sales as an order taker to even have a shot. And the way to do that is to just, in essence, get ready to sell and certified, and do that in the off season, which is right now.
Yeah, I think it's good advice, as far as first becoming proficient at what you come into. I like the idea that you guys have an AP requirement, just so that, you've got a level of sustainability with this new concept that you just got to start with before throwing something else on top of it. So that's pretty good to hear. And yeah, I totally agree with you. It's like the few times I've thought about adding Medicare Advantage into my pipeline, it was September. It ain't happening in September. But, you got to do it back in June or July at the earliest. At least start thinking about it then.
Right.
But the earlier the better, right? Because so much in life is just about getting over the first hurdle. The getting started is the first, the most difficult part. But once you start getting going, it gets easier every single time. You and I do this with agents, any kind of product. They just got to get their foot out the door, do something.
Absolutely.
Start getting some traction. So last question here. What advice would you give someone just getting into all of this?
Well, similar to what I just outlined now, and there's some prerequisites, but yeah, you got to be willing and able, or like I always like to say, you've got to have energy and ethics. Because this isn't as simple as click-clack contract. I mean, we can get a life license and then literally go through somebody's insurance bay or whatever concept or contract portal we use. And in a few days, we've got a writing number and we've got some leads and we're off and running. But you're going to need to be a little more mindful that this is going to require you to be a little more diligent, a little more rigored around your learning and around your preparedness. But look, I make the example usually, David. My daughter, who I'm very proud of, just graduated from the University of Georgia, dual degree, speaks 4 languages, sign languages, make that 5. And 2 years in the Peace Corps, just got back home. And with all of that pedigree, she might, bless her, might be able to make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So I'm asking agents now that did a $90 insurance license, took a test, maybe took it twice, 3 times, 4 times, who knows? We're not judging you. But I'm saying now go a little bit deeper into your craft a little bit deeper into your profession, and I'm watching agents now that are doing $3,000 a week in annualized premium and writing 2 to 3 Medicare a week. They did it, and they were early adopters when I met them 3 years ago. Some of those agents now are in the 200 to 300 member category, and it all came from the humble beginning of ethics, energy, getting started, doing it. What other industry in the world that you and I are zealots for allow anyone to be able to enter, and in a world of meritocracy, through hard work and focus, generate this level of income by serving and deserving? And again, often one of my famous soapbox rants, but this industry will let you do it if you're willing to put in the work.
Yeah, no, you know, it's fascinating because if you look at this, and I think your book does a good job of doing this, you know, you've got a chart that you can lay out expectations over a multi-year period of time. You know, if you take this plan and put together a 5-year plan, and if we're talking, like you said, 2 or 3 deals a week, you're going to trip across those on final expense. I mean, you know as well as I do how many people you run across that are disabled. Most of them are retirement age. They've all got Medicare, and the vast majority of them, because of their income range, are in that Medicare Advantage line. And
Right.
you can come across this stuff so simply. And think about it, you know, 10 a month is not a lot to ask for it, but you do that over 5 years, and you're making a renewal and the low 200s off of each case, and keeping that on the book. That's 6 figures. That's crazy. And
Right.
that can be had by just implementing a system, which yours is, just repetitively over and over again, time and again, each day, each week, and really get a lifestyle and an income level that's, you know, top 10% or greater. It's fantastic. Well, very good, Brandon. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Again, guys, if you're interested, you can go find Brandon's book here. It's 6 Hours to 6 Figures. What would you recommend people go? I know, Brandon, you've got a website if you want to drop it here, or what's the best place to go to?
Well, certainly I love LinkedIn. Love to connect with people and other industry people. My website, brandonlclay.com, actually sort of in that development stage. And even as I lauded you for all the things you do in social media, I've been a little reticent to jump in with 2 feet, but I think it's an idea whose time has come. But between LinkedIn and brandonlclay.com, I'd love to interact. And certainly with your audiences, we may have some things we can put together for them in the future.
Perfect. What I'll do, guys, if you look in the description box below, you'll see links to both if you'd like to reach out to Brandon. And again, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time and insight.
All right. Thank you, David.
All right. Have a good one.